Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight, we settle into a story about a dog who knew before anyone else did. There is something about a dog's attention that a person learns to trust. Not the barking, not the growling. Those are easy to explain. A bird landing on the fence, a cat crossing the lane at the edge of the garden, the distant bark of another dog carried in on the evening breeze. Those sounds have reasons. You trace the reason back and find it, and the world makes sense again. But the watching, the quiet, patient, entirely motionless watching, that is something else. That is what Kamau could not explain. He had lived with Simba for 6 years. A Rhodesian ridgeback, tawny and broad-chested, with the particular stillness of a dog who had never needed to prove himself to anyone. Simba had always been calm, calmer than the house, calmer than the neighborhood, calmer, sometimes, than Kamau himself, who would come home from work with the traffic of Nairobi still humming in his chest, and find the dog stretched out on the cool tiles of the hallway, unbothered by anything. Simba's presence had always been the thing that told Kamau, "You are home now. Everything is still." 3 weeks ago, the stillness changed. It was his wife, Wanjiru, who noticed it first. She had woken at midnight to get a glass of water and found Simba sitting at the end of the hallway, facing the wall between the corridor and the kitchen. Not moving, not making a sound, just sitting, his back straight, his ears lifted just slightly. Not alert exactly, more like attentive, the way a person leans forward when they think they've heard their name. She had assumed he was listening to something outside. A night watchman's footstep. A moth behind the plaster. She had filled her glass and gone back to bed, and mentioned it to Kamau in the morning, almost as an afterthought. That night, Kamau stayed up. He sat in the kitchen with the lights off, and a cup of tea going cold on the counter beside him. The house settled around him. The particular sounds of a house at night, the creak of the roof cooling, the low hum of the refrigerator, the far-off sound of a vehicle somewhere on the main road. Nairobi never truly went silent. But inside the house, inside the garden wall with its bougainvillea and its locked gate, there was a kind of quiet that belonged only to the hours after midnight. At 12:05, Simba stood up from the mat in the sitting room, walked to the hallway, and sat down in front of the wall. Kamau watched from the kitchen doorway. He watched for a long time. Simba did not move, did not growl, did not turn around. He sat with the patience of something that was not waiting for an outcome, only watching. His ears were raised just slightly, as Wanjiru had said. His head was level. And in the dim light coming through the small window above the kitchen sink, Kamau could see the ridge of raised fur along Simba's spine. Not standing, not bristling, just present, the way it always was. A stripe of texture running the length of his back, like a signature. Kamau stayed in the doorway until past 1 o'clock. Simba did not move. In the morning, Kamau pressed his hand flat against the wall. It felt like any wall, painted smooth, slightly cool. He knocked on it 3 times softly and listened. Hollow, normal. He told himself it was fine. Old houses had sounds. Old plaster breathed. He did not mention it to Wanjiru. The next night and the night after that, Simba returned to the same spot at the same time, midnight or just before. The same posture, the same stillness, the same slightly raised ears. On the fourth night, Kamau's son, 8 years old, named Njoroge, who slept lightly and woke for any reason, appeared in the hallway in his pajamas and stood watching Simba with the frank, untroubled curiosity of a child. "What is he doing?" Njoroge asked. "Listening," Kamau said. "To what?" Kamau did not answer. Njoroge watched the dog for a moment longer, then padded back to bed. Simba did not turn around. In the second week, Kamau began to notice other things. The wall itself. He was not sure when he had first started to notice it. But once he did, he could not stop. It was an interior wall, load-bearing, older than the rest of the renovation. When they had first moved in, 7 years ago, the contractor had told them it was original to the structure, built in the 60s, and it was better not to touch it. They had painted over it, hung nothing on it, moved around it. He began to look at it differently now. During the day, it was only a wall, flat and white and entirely unremarkable. But at night, in the hallway's dim light, with Simba sitting before it like something attending a grave, it seemed to have a quality that Kamau struggled to name. Not darkness, not cold, more like density, as if the space behind it were somehow more substantial than the space on either side, as if it were not hollow at all. He started sleeping poorly. He would lie in the dark, listening to the sounds of the house, cataloging them: the refrigerator, the roof, the gate rattling faintly if there was wind, the neighbor's generator cycling on and off somewhere beyond the wall. And at midnight, almost without fail, he would hear the soft pad of Simba's feet on the tiles, the small settling sound of the dog sitting down, and then silence. Absolute, attentive silence. He told himself the dog was hearing rats, or termites, or some creature in the foundations. These things happened in old houses. The structure exhaled. Things lived inside walls. He told himself this until last Tuesday. Last Tuesday, at 10 minutes past midnight, Kamau got up. He walked down the hallway in bare feet, the tiles cool beneath him. Simba heard him coming and turned his head slightly, but did not stand, did not break his posture, only acknowledged, with the slight rotation of one ear, that Kamau was there. Kamau came and stood beside the dog for a moment, his hand resting briefly on Simba's head. The ridge of fur was warm. The dog leaned into his hand, just slightly, and then turned back to the wall. Kamau crouched down. He pressed his ear against the plaster. He stayed very still. At first, nothing. The faint traffic of the city, impossibly distant. The hum of the refrigerator through the structure of the house. A quality of silence that was not quite silence, the way a seashell is not quite empty. And then breathing. He pulled back from the wall. He sat there on his heels in the dark hallway, his heart moving quickly now, and looked at the smooth painted plaster in front of him. It was white and flat, and it had always been white and flat. He had walked past it 10,000 times. His children had run past it. Wanjiru had paused in front of it to adjust her earrings in the small mirror hung on the opposite wall. He pressed his ear to the plaster again. Slow, regular, the barely there sound of air moving in and out of a body. Breathing, He stood up. He turned on the hallway light. The brightness was jarring. It turned the hallway ordinary again, white and clean and familiar. Simba blinked in the light but did not move. Kamau stood with both hands at his sides and looked at the wall for a long time. Then he went back to bed. He lay in the dark beside Wanjiru, who was sleeping, her breath slow and even, her presence warm and solid and entirely real. He stared at the ceiling. From down the hall, he could hear, or perhaps only imagine he could hear, the faint, patient sound of Simba still sitting, still watching, still attending. In the morning, he called the contractor, the man who had overseen the renovation, who had told them not to touch the original wall. He left a message. The contractor had not yet called back. That night, Kamau sat again in the kitchen doorway. He watched Simba take his position at 5 minutes to midnight. He watched the dog settle into that particular stillness. Back, straight, ears lifted, the small ridge of fur along his spine like a sentence he was not yet able to read. He did not press his ear to the wall again. He was not sure what he was afraid of. He was not sure exactly what a breathing wall could mean, what it could contain, what history a house might hold inside itself, without knowing it, without showing it, without giving any sign, for 7 years, but the instinct of a dog who had known all along. He sat with his cold tea and the distant sound of the city and watched his dog watch the wall. The bougainvillea moved gently against the garden fence outside. The gate was locked. The compound was quiet. The night pressed in around the amber light of the kitchen. And inside the house, in the hallway, in the space between the kitchen and the corridor, something breathed. Something breathed and did not speak. And Simba sat before it, patient and still and certain, the way he had always been certain, as if he had known this moment was coming, as if he had been waiting, not with fear, but with the deep, uncomplicated attention of a creature who understood that some things simply needed to be witnessed. Kamau closed his eyes. He listened, and the house around him held its breath. Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles, where even the quietest walls can carry something long kept still. If this unease settled somewhere in you, if the sound of that breathing found a place to rest, then let it stay a little while longer. Some things don't need to be explained to be real. They only need to be felt. Rest now. And if you hear something in the walls tonight, well, perhaps you always have.